Lucius Annaeus Seneca was born into privilege, but never peace. Born in Cordoba, Spain, around 4 BCE, Seneca was the son of a prominent Roman rhetorician and raised in Rome, at the heart of the empire. His family had money, access, tutors, but behind that opulence was a sickly boy, weak in body and often tormented by illness. For years he battled respiratory issues that left him bedridden and physically frail. And yet, while his body failed him, his mind blazed. He was drawn early to Stoicism, a philosophy that taught mastery over one's desires, fears, and fate. To many Romans, Stoicism was cold. It demanded restraint in a world of indulgence. But to young Seneca, it was salvation, because Seneca understood suffering not as theory, but as daily reality. As he aged, he rose rapidly in intellectual and political circles, becoming known for his piercing intellect, sharp writing, and moral seriousness. He entered public life and became a senator under Emperor Caligula, a ruler infamous for cruelty. And yet, Seneca survived, barely. It was said Caligula hated him for speaking with too much brilliance. Only Seneca's poor health, it was whispered, kept him from being executed. Caligula didn't want to waste a sword on a man so close to death. But Seneca would outlive Caligula, and Rome would call on him again. In 41 CE, Seneca's life took a devastating turn. He was accused of adultery with the emperor's sister, possibly false, possibly political, and exiled to the island of Corsica. It was a brutal sentence. 8 years of isolation, disgrace, and silence. And yet, he wrote. He wrote letters, essays, and philosophical reflections that burned with clarity and pain. Rather than curse the world, he examined it. He asked not why he was punished, but how one should live when life turns cruel. It was during exile that he wrote some of his earliest reflections on anger, grief, and control, planting the seeds for what would become his enduring legacy. In a twist of fate, Emperor Claudius's new wife, Agrippina, brought Seneca back from exile to tutor her son, a brilliant, volatile boy named Nero. Yes, that Nero. Seneca took the assignment with hope. Perhaps Stoicism could temper the fire inside this young heir. Perhaps he could shape an emperor toward wisdom, not tyranny. And for a time, it worked. In the early years of Nero's reign, with Seneca advising him, Rome experienced relative peace and governance rooted in reason. But power corrupts. As Nero aged, he grew paranoid and violent. He murdered his own mother. He drifted from Seneca's guidance, and eventually he demanded something unimaginable: Seneca's suicide. When the imperial order came, Seneca did not protest. He gathered his friends, embraced his wife, and opened his veins calmly. The scene was brutal, but peaceful. When his blood flowed too slowly, he drank poison. When that failed, he entered a hot bath, attempting to quicken death. Even in his final moments, he taught. His death was not just an end. It was a final essay, a living demonstration of his beliefs, that virtue was found not in avoiding death, but in meeting it with courage. And though his body perished, his words did not. Seneca's writings on anger, grief, time, courage, and the brevity of life have survived nearly 2,000 years. His essays are quoted by presidents, CEOs, athletes, monks, and philosophers alike, because he didn't write for emperors, he wrote for us, for anyone struggling with fear, with envy, with rage, with loss, for anyone who's ever whispered, "Why me?" Among his most powerful essays is De Ira, on anger. Seneca saw anger as the most dangerous of all emotions, not just because it's destructive, but because it feels righteous. No plague has cost the human race more. To Seneca, anger is not power, it's slavery, a loss of reason, a surrender to impulse. He compared it to a whirlwind that drags the soul with it, always downward. So how do we fight it? Seneca offered several timeless strategies. 1. Delay the response. The greatest remedy for anger is delay. Anger burns hottest in the first few moments. If you can pause, breathe, wait, count, you give reason a chance to return. 2. Rehearse worst-case scenarios. By visualizing insults, misfortunes, or criticism before they happen, we rob them of their sting. Seneca believed that mental rehearsal builds emotional armor. 3. Reflect, don't react. Ask, is this anger useful? Does it change the outcome? Will I regret this tomorrow? Most often, we find it does nothing but poison the moment and prolong the pain. Anger, to Seneca, was a fire that always burns the one holding it. Before he was a Stoic icon, Seneca was a human being, flawed, brilliant, and torn by contradiction. And yet he forged a life of depth and influence through a handful of powerful, lived practices. What made him rise even in exile? What helped him stay calm in a world full of madness? These 3 habits defined his legacy. First, daily philosophical reflection. Seneca believed philosophy wasn't for lecture halls, it was for life. Every night he journaled about his day, what he did well, where he failed, what he learned. He turned every mistake into fuel. 2. Practicing voluntary discomfort. Even as a wealthy man, Seneca would periodically live as if he had nothing, eating simple food, sleeping on the ground, wearing poor clothes. Why? To remember that what we fear, we can endure. This habit made him fearless in the face of exile, illness, and even death. 3. Writing as a tool for clarity. Seneca used writing to refine his thinking and rule his emotions. Whether in exile or at court, he wrote constantly, letters to friends, essays, dramatic plays. He once said, "If you wish to be loved, love. If you wish to be wise, write." What made Seneca different wasn't just his intellect. It was his ability to stay still when the world roared. Contemporaries like the historian Tacitus described him as equal parts sage and survivor. To some, he was too entangled in politics to be pure, but to others, he was a lighthouse, showing that wisdom wasn't about isolation. It was about resilience in motion. Seneca lived in courts full of corruption, envy, and death, and yet, through it all, he returned, again and again, to the belief that virtue begins within. He once wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And in a world full of imagined disasters, Seneca's mind remained anchored to truth. In our world, filled with outrage, distraction, and constant reaction, Seneca's words feel almost prophetic. He reminds us that life is short, that time is our only true wealth, that anger is a thief, that peace is earned, and that death is not the end, but a mirror to help us live better now. Seneca's life wasn't perfect. He walked through power, pain, exile, wealth, and silence, but at each stage he left behind clarity, not to impress, not to escape, but to remind us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Real strength lies there. And in remembering that, we begin to live, not just wisely but deeply,